Awesome, man. Well, thanks so much for coming on. It's been a little while. I was reflecting the other day on some of the athletes that I used to run around with here in Ballarat. And one of the Aussies that I reckon you might have run against a few times is a friend of mine by the name of Collis Birmingham,
Yep.
who he was on the international scene. And I thought I just jumped across to have a little freshen up on some of your PBs last night. And I noticed that your profile picture with World Athletics is you leading Collis at the 2013 World Cross Country Championships. But that's going back a few years, man.
Yeah, I used to
What's
roll with
news?
him and Benny Saint as well. Yeah.
Oh, two of the best blokes going around. Benny St. Lawrence is a fantastic fella. He was a big inspiration of mine actually, because I was a little bit of a later developer in the world of athletics, and
Yeah.
he started relatively young and then left the sport and got fat for a couple of
Yeah, he has
years,
a great story.
and then came back and just started absolutely ripping it up at about like age 25 or 26. And once I saw him tearing it up at 25 or 26, I thought, okay, don't hang up the spikes just yet. I'll give it a few more years. But yeah, that's going back, man. So were there any other Aussies? Did you race much against Mottram, or was he sort of phasing out as you were peaking?
No, I mean, I definitely raced him, but he was phasing out by the time I was coming up. But I do remember he and I raced. We went 1-2 in a battle in Crystal Palace many years ago.
I didn't realize the stature that you reached with some of your times. Like if I had have guessed, I thought you were sort of a 13, 15 man. And then last night, as I was reading through the World Athletics profile, I thought, mate, I've cut him off well and truly. Like, so 13:02, couple of Diamond League or Crystal Palace victories.
Yeah,
If I'm not wrong. So what was you were kind of 5,000 meters at the end of it. That was probably between 5 and 10. Like I saw 27:16 's bloody good as well, but I was trying to weigh up which one I thought was better. But they're both. I mean, 13:02 sounds
Well,
pretty
so
good.
13:02 was pre-super shoes, right? Too the 10K was after the super shoes, the fancy spikes came around. So the 5K is probably a little bit better.
I did like 13:02. But you're right, it's amazing actually that you mentioned that, because I'd had, despite being involved in sort of coaching and this podcast now for nearly 4 years, one thing that blew my mind as I've started to get ready for, long story short, I was trying to prepare for the Melbourne Marathon this year, but I missed an entry that I'm not going to bore the audience with all the details because they've heard me bitch about it too many times. But one of the things that blew my mind was just how much the technology in that shoe department has just increased over the last few years. Like I went into a shoe shop here in Victoria, in Melbourne, a couple of weeks ago, and I looked at the wall and I was like, I don't really know what I'm looking at anymore, because we used to have like your structured triaxes, and I was an Asics man. Like any of the GT series, I was pretty comfortable with and familiar with back in the day. But then, looking at that wall, I was like, man, it's almost I mean, it is a field of expertise for so many people now. They've got podcasts dedicated just to breaking down.
It's unreal. It's unreal. The tech that's gone in now, it's phenomenal. It'll be interesting to see long term how it handles, because I think it does, these new carbon shoes, super shoes, does alter some people's gaits in a not so beneficial way. But they're so much faster, and the ability to recover is so much higher in between sessions that it's changed the game for sure.
Yeah, so you're thinking maybe long-term injuries people might face after just being exposed to these shoes over the years?
Yeah, but I mean, the trade-off is, back in the day when we trained in, the lightest shoe possible, that was basically nothing. There are a lot of injuries from that as well. So, it's a trade-off that we'll see how it happens.
What were you racing in back when you were running 13:02s? What spikes were you rocking then?
I was with Saucony, and it was the lightest, stiffest spike I could find. It was actually their 1,500 meter spike. I didn't like any of the distance spikes. I thought they were too flexible and soft. And it was very aggressive. I kept trying to get Saucony to make more aggressive spikes, and they kept telling me, we can't sell those. They would break all the major market for Saucony was a high school runner, a college runner, and they were like, we'll tear all their Achilles. So I had to make do with some of the shorter distance spikes to be able to race.
Yeah. How many years were you with Saucony for?
I was with them for 9 or 10 years.
Gee, it's
Yeah.
really interesting actually just to see how much they're I know you're an ASICS man now, aren't you?
Yep. Yep.
But the Saucony, they sort of they tripped me out a little bit because, as I said, I stepped back into the world of running and knew very little about the shoes. And when I was at this shop a few weeks ago, a lady brought out their Saucony. They're called Endorphin Shift 3.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And she goes, "Oh, these Sauconys are good." And I was like, I honestly didn't know that Saucony and good was the thing, whether that was marketing or what. But it kind of tripped me out. And what was funny was I put them on and I had a little run on the treadmill. And I said to her, I go, "These feel incredible." She goes, "Yeah, they've lifted their game." I said,
Yeah.
"Oh, that's good." Like, this is Aussie dollars I'm talking about here. But she goes, and she goes, "And value for money, like you're not going to do much better than this." I said, "Oh, how much am I paying for that?" She goes, "These ones are 250." I go, "Come on now, like $250. Like Saucony was what you went to back in the day when you're on a budget." But it's actually incredible. Even ASICS, the last few years, it's been really impressive to see. We've got Jess Stenson over here who rocks ASICS, and there's quite a number of athletes on the international circuit now who are rocking both of those. But
Yeah,
back
so
when you were
they've come
rocking,
back in 2019 is when ASICS really started upping their game big time and getting back into it and really putting a lot of new tech and a lot of new R&D into the shoes and making them something special again. So they're doing really well.
you sort of naturally just have to, like, when it's interesting when a company like Nike starts just throwing out things like the Vaporflies. It's been incredible to watch just the response of
Yeah.
other companies. And that's one thing that I've found really interesting as well. Just before I hit record, I mentioned the young Aussie guy, Cam Myers, who's running 333. And at 17 years old, back when I was competing, like the fastest I ever ran was 349. And that was okay here in the state. But that would win a lot of races here. But like on a local level.
Yeah.
But then you have a bloke like that go out and run 333. Then there's another New Zealand guy who stepped up to the plate and starts running around the same time. There's a Norwegian kid who's 18 running 332. It seems it doesn't matter if it's in sort of the development of technology or in the improvement in times being run. There seems to be something in the air that when someone pushes something to a new threshold, people tend to follow pretty quickly. I can't
Yeah.
remember the exact stat, but I remember up until Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile, it was something that was just never going to be done. And I might be exaggerating here, but I want to say in the next couple of years, like 100 athletes did it.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. I mean, it's the psychological piece, right? It's as soon as a barrier is broken or was deemed impossible or hard to do, once it's done and it's been done by somebody that you've raced against in the past or is kind of like you, it makes it much easier to do it again, for anybody. And that's the same thing. But I think also in today's connected world, uh, people just know a lot more about training, know a lot more about opportunities to race, and they're just more educated. And so at a younger age, and they're able to translate that a little bit better. I mean, I knew when I was growing up, I grew up in Maine and small state in the U.S., and I didn't know that running existed outside of Maine. And so, my training, once I got to my first national caliber meet, I looked up to, it was Chris Selinsky. And I remember him saying, he used to run 100-mile weeks in high school. And I'd go back to my hotel room and add up all the miles that I ran that week. And the biggest week I've ever did was 25 miles. And like, I never knew somebody could run more. And so, just the more you learn, and you learn that, what you don't know is out there. It kind of elevates the whole game.
That's a really good point, man. He was a big inspiration of mine, actually. What are you, 37?
Yep.
So you're a year older than me, so we probably admired a lot of the same athletes growing up. But he was one that I liked because I thought if a bloke with quads and a torso that big can run 26:59, there's still hope in the game. Because that was one thing that I was definitely carried around the tracks. I had legs that were designed more for a footballer than a middle distance runner. So I saw him and was inspired for a different reason. But it's a really good point. Another guy that I'd been really interested in more recently, for the same reasons that you just touched on, just the abundance of knowledge that's out there, is Jakob Ingebrigtsen. Just seeing how young he was when he started to really lay down some of the miles. I know he's got the two older brothers who sort of paved the path before him, was probably offering a bit of education on top of whatever it was that he was learning
and
himself.
Perfect training partners too.
For sure,
Yeah.
for sure. What do you just mean in terms of quality of athlete?
Right.
Yeah, it's been unbelievable. So as you were growing up in Maine, when did you sort of start stepping into the world of distance running?
So I started just running for fun when I was quite young. My dad was in a neighbor in our neighborhood was training for, I think it was the 100th anniversary of the Boston Marathon. And so they started running, and so I was like, oh, my dad's running. That's the cool thing to do. I want to start doing the rec program in town and doing half-mile jogs and stuff like that. And I quickly was shown that I was quite good at it, and I enjoyed running faster than other people. So I just kept at it. But when I got to high school, I also started cross-country skiing, Nordic skiing. And I really, really loved Nordic skiing. And so that was actually my main focus. And so when I went to college, I ran and I skied at college. And I actually thought that I was going to give up running and just go the Nordic ski path. And something brought me back to running post college, and I ended up running instead.
Oh, so it was post college that you made the big move back.
Yeah. So I took a year off of when I was in college. I decided what's the one thing that I wanted to do left in my running career, and then be fine walking away with never running again, and focus all of my energy into Nordic skiing. And it was break the 4-minute mile. You know, when you're in high school and college, like that's the cool barrier. And so I was like, all right, once I do that, I'm done. And so I did that, and I was like, I'm done hanging up the spikes. And I took a year off from college, and I went out to Idaho and joined a professional ski group out there, and was like, I'm going to be a skier now. But it was the first time I've ever trained at altitude, and I kind of went gung-ho into the training a little bit too much. I really upped the volume and the intensity, and I kind of burnt myself out. And so my ski coach at the time was saying, all right, you know, you're so far gone with fatigue and overtraining that why don't you take, you know, a few weeks off from training and just go out for, you know, 10 to 20 minute jogs every day, just to get the body loosened up and try to help, you know, aid in recovery. And so I started doing that, and I realized how much I loved running and how easy running came to me. It seemed like when I was running, I didn't have to think, I just floated. Whereas when I skied, it was something that I really enjoyed doing, but it was something that I had to mentally think about constantly. It wasn't something that came naturally to me at all. And so I made the decision, well, when I got my energy levels back, I was like, well, I guess running, if I want to take one of these two sports to the furthest I can, running's the way to go. And I became a full-on runner after that.
Wow, it seems like I don't know anything, to be honest, about skiing, but in terms of cross training, I know a lot of athletes get on the elliptical when they're trying to save a little bit of the pressure that they'd be putting on their joints with double runs and things like that. It seems like a pretty nice sport that if you're flirting on the edge of two sports, that they complement each other really nicely.
Yeah, it's a lot like cycling, where, you know, there's zero impact really on the body. And you can really work the cardiovascular system really well. And the one downside with Nordic skiing is you'd bulk up quite a bit. There's a lot of upper body strength that you need skiing. Actually, if you look at World Cup skiers, more than 50% of the top men World Cup skiers, the majority of their power comes from the upper body. From the hips up so they're more arm dominant than leg dominant for propelling themselves forward by like a 60-40, 70-30 margin. It's quite large. The women are a little bit closer. The women are more like 55-45 between arms and legs. But top level Nordic skiing is very arm dominant. And me as a runner, I just never got my arms strong enough to really hang with them.
Yeah, it's so interesting. So obviously, when I think of cycling as an alternative to running, the thing that puts me off there is just the amount of time and the amount of miles.
Oh, yeah.
And probably cars just flying past you. But in terms of the Nordic skiing, is the training fairly comparable in terms of time to what it is with running? Like, how do you structure the weeks with the
I
skiing?
do more. So when I was really into it in college, my OD, my over distance would be a 5 hour ski.
Oh,
And
wow.
a typical training session would be 90 minutes to 150 minutes to like 2.5 hours. And so you can do a lot more volume. Yeah, for sure.
Just based on the fact that you're not putting so much pressure through the joints.
Right. Exactly.
Man, that's really interesting. So you're obviously at college. Yeah, it's not like you're an incredibly late developer. Like at that time, to be breaking a 4 minute mile at what? You would have been 21, 22, maybe even younger.
It was my third year, my junior year. So yeah, probably 2021. Yeah.
And what did your training look like at the time? Because it's really interesting to hear that.
Mostly
If,
Nordic skiing. So how I would break up the year is in the fall would be cross country season for running, and I'd do that fully, and then NCAA's was always the Monday before Thanksgiving, so late November, and I'd race NCAA cross, hop on a plane and fly to Montana, where I do my first ski race the day before Thanksgiving, like 3 or 4 days later. Having no time on snow, I just go right from cross country running to cross country skiing, ski the whole winter, and I'd start off not being very good skier, obviously, and then start getting better and better throughout the season. The more time I was skiing, and then immediately switch at the end to going back to running. So I like very segmented my year and focused strictly on each one. So when I ran, when I'd run fast times on the track, I never ran in college probably how fast I should have run, but it would always be within 2 months of first run of the year for a while from coming off a ski season. Yeah.
Gee, so what? Coming back off the ski season onto the track season, you were. I know you said your arms never really took off like a Nordic ski should have, but surely you were packing a little bit on
Oh
the start
yeah,
line compared to
yeah,
some of those other runners.
yeah. So typically, I remember, in cross, I would typically for running, I'd typically be like 165 pounds, and then I'd gain 20 pounds throughout the winter to bulk up, and then by track, I may have been able to lose 10 pounds. I may have been like high 170s. And then it'd take all summer to shed the weight back and then just start it back over again.
It must have been so frustrating for your college coaches, was it, to see
Yeah, I'm sure.
the potential that you had and the fact you're running 4 minute miles at 20 and to be leaning towards skiing. What do you think it was? Like you just felt like the appeal of running at that time wasn't there?
Yeah, it was always a love-hate relationship with running growing up. It was always something that other people told me I was really good at. And I knew that I was good at because I was winning races, right? But it was more I was doing it because other people told me I should do it. Whereas skiing was something I did because I really enjoyed it. So skiing was for me and running was for other people. And it wasn't until I stepped back from running and said, I'm not ever running again, that I was able to shed that aspect of it, and shed that I was no longer doing it for other people, but now I was doing it for my own goals and my own desires. And that was the only way that I was able to pick running back up.
Yeah. So Maine, I've never been to Maine, but assume is it the one? Is it a couple of hours or outside of New York? Like you mentioned, Boston was relatively close before as well. So
Yeah, so I grew up about 2 hours. I grew up in southern Maine, so it was about 2 hours north of Boston. Yeah,
oh, sure. Okay.
yeah.
So because just the
Most people
introduction
call it Canada, but it's Maine.
yeah, yeah, okay. What you trying to avoid that that title, or is or is there actually a little conjecture as to where it is?
No, I mean Maine was basically surrounded by Canada. But yeah, no, we're
Yeah, I would claim American over Canada
Yeah.
as well. I'm so sorry to all our Canadian listeners. It's just a little bit of a soft spot in my heart for the US. So okay, so there came a point where for you, like you got lured back into the world of running. And then from there, how old were you when you decided, okay, well, I'm back. This is going to be my focus now?
So I graduated from college in 2009, and went out to the Oregon Track Club out in Eugene immediately, and ran for them for a year. Realized I hated being on the West Coast, and it just wasn't the scenario for me. And moved back to my college town. Originally to train by myself and do it my own, but luckily a little group formed out there, and I've been in Hanover, New Hampshire ever since.
Gee, so what was it about the West Side that you didn't enjoy?
I don't know. I think I'm just a New Englander through and through. I'm a homeboy, and so I really like the Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, New England area, and the West Coast was just too different for me. Eugene, Oregon was too big of a city. For example, I lived right next to the University of Oregon's football stadium, and the football stadium could hold more people than the entire city of Portland, Maine, which is the largest city in Maine. And I just couldn't deal with so many people around me. And so I had to get out of there.
Well, it blows my mind about the US college system. Like here or university college in Australia. I mean, we've got our sporting competitions, but mate, like good luck trying to fill up a basketball stadium, let alone a football stadium with fans for college sport. It really blows my mind. I went to Eugene. My brother-in-law lives in a place called Medford in Oregon.
Yep.
He married an American girl. So the Americans won one from us, and we've been over there quite a few times just to catch up with him. And I know what you mean. It was the old. Actually, it wasn't the football stadium we saw. We went and saw Hayward Field before they had done it all up.
Yep.
And I kind of fell in love with it because obviously, as you can see here, I'm such like anyone our age, I'm sure, or anyone in the running world, there was a little bit of an allure of Prefontaine back in the day. So to go there and see the sights, I kind of fell in love with it. But obviously, I mean, probably the weather in Australia is a little more comparable to the west coast of America than going from the east coast of America to the west coast. So at least that part I had on side. But there were some good athletes training around then. I think I've completely blanked on his name, but we had an 800-meter runner, Lockie something, that was training in Oregon back in the day. I think he was like a 145 man. He went to Oregon. I don't know if that rings any bells.
Yeah, so Nick Simmons was there when I was there.
Yes.
For the year. And who was the other big 800-meter runner? Christian Smith was there.
Mm-hmm.
He and I think those were like the two big 1800-meter guys. They were there when I was there. Yeah.
And was Jordan Hussey and that
she was
kind
after.
of...
So she was.
Okay.
She might have been in university at the U of O at that time, but she wasn't part of the Oregon Track Club or anything like that.
Yeah. And what was the track club like? Because from Australia, I look at the idea of Oregon Track Club and think, mate, that's the dream. Like if I was running faster, I would have, and got any offers, I would have been there with you. But unfortunately, I wasn't running a sub 4-minute mile, and I was no good at skiing, so I was limited for options. But in terms of culture, so was that back in the day? Was that Salazar looking after you guys?
No. So that was Mark Rowland.
That's right. Yep.
It was like his first year or his second year of coaching was when I was there. And so Frank Gagliano was the outgoing coach, and he was the one that recruited me. And then Mark Rowland was there. And I really enjoyed Mark Rowland. He was going from a program where there was very few athletes to a program that we had. Oregon Track Club at the time was 20 plus athletes. And so I never worked with Mark Rowland on a day-to-day basis. It was like assistants coaches that would work with me. And I don't know, we just kind of, the group that I was training with kind of felt like we were kind of tossed aside and kind of forgotten about. And so made some great friends, guys that I was training with, but it was, it didn't feel like a full cohesive team. It was very partialed out teams, kind of squads that trained together. And so it wasn't the same atmosphere that I was looking for.
Sure. And you mean that it was separated based on how coaches perceived talent at the time? So they had a certain level of athlete that was like, okay, this athlete's going somewhere, this athlete's maybe not there yet?
Probably a bit of that, and probably a bit of, I mean, between that and distance, like what event you would be doing. But the focus was definitely on Lauren Fleshman, who was there at the time, Sally Kipiego, who was there, and Nick Simmons. Those were like the people that Mark Rowland really had focus on, and everybody else kind of was doing their own thing off the side.
Yeah. It's very strange that I noticed that it's not just limited to running. Like I used to experience that from time to time, not even on purpose and not even in a negative way, but there'd be certain groups that I would train with, and I was like, oh man, I've been here for a while now, and I still feel like I'm in the outskirts. I just can't quite
Yeah.
connect with this group, and I could never figure out whether it was a talent thing or whether it was just a time involved in the group. And I'm sure there was a number of things. Perhaps it was just the fact that they didn't like my personality. I never wanted to look at that one. Yeah, it's
But I know
interesting.
that like right after I left, when I left, there was quite a few people who left the program at the same time. And so it went from a group that was like 20 plus people down to 15, 10, 15. And I heard that things smoothed out a lot more when there was less people. So I think it was one of the situations was Roland came into a program that was much larger than he really wanted it to be.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's the reason I only ever really take on 10 athletes at a max at a time. And it's for that reason. Like,
Yeah.
obviously, the beauty of the internet is the fact that you can coach people in all different areas. But one of the things that I find, if I start spreading out my energy too thin with too many athletes, that is something that definitely creeps in. You start feeling like, oh crap,
Mhm.
I haven't spoken to whoever it is for a week or so now. I better get in touch. And
Yeah.
I definitely find that I sympathise with him in that department, because it doesn't take much for your energy just to be spread too thin. Yeah, you sound like a kind of athlete as well who just enjoys your own company. Like from what you've said, yeah. Did you enjoy getting out there and doing a lot of the training by yourself?
Yeah, I mean, uh, majority of my career I trained by myself. I mean, other than a period of time for 1 year that Sam Chalanga trained with me, I trained completely solo until the very end. Most recently, when I hired a training partner to move out and start training with me. So the vast majority, 95% of my career, I was running everything by myself. A very lucky day would be somebody would be at the track holding a stopwatch for me. That would be like a prime day. But it was mostly just me doing my thing by myself. And there's aspects that I enjoyed of that. The biggest thing is, going out for an easy run. I can run exactly how my body wanted to. I could run the time of day I wanted to. So I could sleep in and still get my double in, but just spread them out a little bit different. And the biggest thing was just I could run as slow or as fast as I wanted to an easy day. Most of my workouts were more tempo threshold based, and those again are more feel than prescribed pace. And so I think that I was much better at being able to find that effort and not get pushed to go too hard or held back to go too slow. I could run that level very well, but the times I did train with other people, it was so much easier. I could run so many more harder workouts, and those were when my best times came. Was off the back of training with other people. So I don't think I ever reached the level that I could have had I trained with training partners the entire time throughout my career. But I knew after I moved out to Eugene and spent a year out in Eugene, because that's where people told me that I had to go if I wanted to be a professional athlete. Where do you go? You go to Eugene. Who do you join? You join the Oregon Track Club. And I realized that wasn't the path for me. And so when I did move back to the East Coast, I made a firm pact that I was going to do my training for me and what made me happy. And for me, being happy was being here and being happy with my life outside of running. And as long as that is fine, then I can make the running work. And that was basically, I wasn't willing to compromise my life outside of the sport to try to find that extra edge. And I think uh, there's no way that my career would have been as long as it has been if I went a different route.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you mentioned that back when you were younger, you were told that if you wanted to be a professional athlete, that's where you need to go. And I mentioned, and I was serious before when I said if I was good enough, I would have probably
Yeah.
tried to get into Oregon. It's a very similar story here. Like I know there's a number of other colleges around America that has a really good college system that a number of Aussies have gone to and plenty of Americans run it. But um, I wonder how much that has to do with, to go back to your original point about the internet and just being aware of all the groups out there, and especially in America. I mean, here in Australia, we've got a number of great, like really, really good groups, both community level, professional level, some combining both of those. But to look at the States at the moment, and I mean, I put you in this category now with what you've started. I'm interested to hear more about that. But I mean, from Tin Man Elite to a number of the groups all around the country, it seems as though, I mean, Oregon's one of many options now.
Yeah. Or it is one of many options, but where are all the options, right? They're all clustered in certain spots. And so it's still, if you're a runner in the United States and you want to go somewhere, where do you go? You have to go to Boulder, you go to Flagstaff. Those are really, or you go to Oregon, right? Those are like the three options. And so a lot of that is social media driven. A lot of that is, driven because one group has some success and then it's deemed everybody has to go there to have success. I'm a firm believer that if it works for one person, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for you. You got to find out what works for you. And so that's one of the reasons why I've been trying to really start up this Northwoods Athletics group, where showing there is other options and you can make options and opportunities for yourself in other places. You don't have to go to these places just because that's where people say you have to go. You should go to a place because you actually want to be there and you want to live there and you like the lifestyle there. And so for me, that's New England. I love New England. I think that there's better training here than anywhere else in the United States. And so it's a shame that people don't know much about these other training venues that are out there. And I'm sure there's, many of them throughout the country that are way overlooked, that could be phenomenal training groups, based out of there, but everybody just gets on this bandwagon that you have to go to Boulder, you have to go to Flagstaff, and I've always shunned that idea that you can go where you want to go.
Yeah, it's true. We were laughing on here a while ago. I think I was speaking to him about it, Pat Tinn, and
Yep.
I can't remember. You might know better than me. Do you know where he's based right now? I want to say it's like North Carolina.
Yeah, I think so. I think the Durham, Raleigh triangle area there. Yeah, North Carolina.
See, I thought that was where you went if you wanted to be Michael Jordan, but apparently there's a number of athletes starting to get a bit of a reputation there. And I mean, if Pat Tiernan moves there, he's a 211 man on debut at 27-20 man or whatever. I mean, it speaks volumes as to the fact that, or to emphasize your point, that there's more than one option now. But I'm interested to hear more about your sort of move back east, because it must have been not humbling, but it would have been a challenge at a younger age like that, to be told, okay, you want to be professional, go here, do this, and then getting there and being a little disenfranchised or disconnected from, the group or whatever you thought it was that was going to be, just didn't quite live up to the expectations. Was it hard to go back to the East Coast? Had you sort of decided at that point that you were happy just to train by yourself, or were you thinking, I'll get a coach, or were you sort of, I know you said a lot of your training was by yourself, but were you self-coached as well?
So when I went back, I made a decision that I was going to go back, thinking that I'd just go back and train by myself. But serendipitously, there was a new track program that started in Hanover, New Hampshire, where I moved back to, or I went to college, starting up right when I left. And it was coached by Tim Bro. And so I did that. That was phenomenal for.
That's a name I haven't heard of for a while.
I
He was
know.
a steeplechaser, wasn't he?
Exactly.
Dude, yeah.
Yep.
Sorry to interrupt. That just rung a bell. I was like, I know that name. Yeah, he was a wild man. I loved him.
Yeah,
Great.
And so that was great. But that fizzled out very quickly. That was only around for just under 2 years, I want to say. And so after that, I was fully on my own, and I trained under Tim Bro still for a few years, and then started working with Mark Coogan who was the Dartmouth coach at the time, the Dartmouth women's coach, and trained with him for a while. And then he had a conflict of interest contractually with New Balance once he left Dartmouth and was no longer able to work with me. And so did some coaching, self-coaching myself, went back with Tim Bro for a bit, self-coached some more, and then worked with Ray Tracy out of Providence. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. And how much did your training vary from that point? I know your career sort of spans quite a number of years, so I could be a little bit more specific. But when you were running your fastest times, and I hope they were around the same time, like your 27:14 and your 13:02.
No, those were a long time apart.
Well, that's actually, I mean, that could actually make this conversation more interesting. How?
Yeah.
Do you know the years
those
of
are
difference?
8 years apart, maybe.
Wow. Okay.
10 years apart.
Did you run
maybe?
first? Wow.
So the 5K first.
Okay.
Yep. And that I was working with Mark Coogan then, and that's when I was training with Sam Chalanga. And yep. And then the 27:14 was just a few years ago when I was working with Ray Tracy, and I had a training partner that I hired, Dan Kurtz, who's still in the area running with me.
Awesome.
Yeah.
How different was your training in between those?
Quite a bit different.
Two
Quite a bit
PBs.
different. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I could be testing your memory going back a decade, but like, what did your weekly structure look like when you ran your 13:02 in terms of how did you divide up the miles and the speed and things?
So let's see if I can remember correctly. It was a lot of, so Coogan had me on the standard week schedule, in calendar week schedule of the universities, where you typically Monday easy, Tuesday workout, Wednesday slightly longer run, Thursday easy, Friday workout, Saturday easy, Sunday long. And that was the plan under Coogan. Did a lot of mixed workout of threshold tempo work with speed, but a lot of high volume. And so I was actually looking back at the training under Coogan a little while ago, and a typical workout may be 5 by a K in 250, then a 20-minute tempo, so a 4-mile tempo, and then another 5 by a K in like 245. So I would get pretty good volume, or I'd do a 20-minute tempo, a bunch of 2-minute hill reps, and then another 20-minute tempo. There's a lot of tempo stuff with some speed around on the sides. But most workouts would be 8 to 11 miles of volume in the workout, and then warm up and cool down.
Gee.
Rarely did anything especially fast. Rarely did anything that was 5K race pace. Those were very few and far between.
Yeah.
And so it was a different. And then long runs every weekend would be 18 to 20 miles and running 6-minute pace. So slightly not hard long runs, but moving long runs. Whereas with Ray Tracy, he spreads everything out a little bit more, and it's more of like a 10-day cycle. And so the mileage was a lot higher. I was probably running an additional 20 miles a week, rolling 7-day. And the workouts were faster. And so a workout under Tracy leading up would be, what would be one? 10 times 600 meters in 131, and then a few 300s quick afterwards. Or he did a lot of, he liked the 2 by 20-minute tempos a lot. And he liked a lot of 1.5 mile repeats. And so it was it was a more grinding, without question. Ray Tracy was a lot more grinding of a workout. Whereas Coogan was a lot of bopping around between run fast, fairly relaxed, run fast, fairly relaxed.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting that even the earlier one, it still sounds like you were covering quite a few miles. Like I know you
Oh yeah,
said, sorry, I've got the coaches' names muddled up. I can't remember which one was before and which one was after. But that the earlier one sounded like you were
Coogan.
still ticking off.
Yeah,
Yeah, Coogan, you're
yeah.
still ticking off quite a few miles.
Oh yeah.
And I love the fact that you're saying you weren't doing anything too incredibly fast. There'd be so many audience members disgusted at you that you mentioned the second set of 5 by a K were 2:45s. But I guess it's all in context of the times that you were running. But
Yeah.
yeah, so on a weekly sort of rolling average, what were you doing in terms of miles with Coogan in
So Coogan
comparison?
would probably be closer to 90 to 95, probably average wise.
Yep.
And under Ray Tracy, it would be 115 to 120.
So what's that? 860. Oh, so close to 200 kilometers, or I don't know if you know your metric system well, but I think, is that right? 160 K is 100 miles. Sorry, 100 miles is 160 K. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, so you were, man, that's like in terms of going back to the time consumption element, that's where the Nordic skiers got to come out in you, because
Yeah.
that's a huge time commitment. So in terms of doubles and things like that, what would you be doing for your double
I mean, I
runs?
double all the time.
Yeah.
Like a 12 miles in the morning, 5 in the afternoon was a standard easy day.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable. And did you feel like your body? Well, obviously it was responding well in the sense that you ran fast off that. But was that something you were able to maintain for a long time?
I was with Ray for maybe 5 years, I want to
Gee.
say. But doing race training solo was very challenging.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was getting burnt out at the end doing that training solo. Doing it with other people was fine. Like when I had Dan Kurtz as a training partner, it was fine. But doing that work solo was very challenging because Coogan's workouts were so much more change of speed. Mentally, it's a lot easier to do that by yourself. Because even if you're tired, you can go and hop out and do a 20-minute tempo by yourself and still get in good work. And all the fast stuff was quite short in duration. Ray Tracy loved the workout where you have to grind one extra lap on the track than you actually want to. And it makes you very tough and it makes you very strong, no doubt. He's had great success and I ran well under him. But that's hard to do solo. and when I had training partners that helped me through majority of the workouts, Ray Tracy's workouts were much more manageable and fun. But not as much completely solo.
Yeah. Did your body hold up well in terms of injury? It sounds like just the fact that you've ran so fast and been able to endure so much of this just long mileage style training, or at least from my perspective, it sounds very long miles. That you were naturally a pretty strong guy. Did you struggle with injuries at all, or did you get away with it pretty easily?
I've gotten very lucky in not having many injuries that actually take me out.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I'm a runner, so I don't think I ever had a week where I wasn't in pain running. And most mornings I wouldn't be able to doing the track workouts. I wouldn't be able to walk to the bathroom in the morning. Normally, I'd be hobbling about. It'd take me a while to warm up. And it wasn't until I did my first marathon build with Ray that the paces came way down, slower, right? And the mileage went up even more, but the body responded to that even more. And that could just been from age. But that's when I stopped being in so much pain all the time, is when we kind of got off the track and started doing a little bit more longer distance training.
Yeah. And what do you got your eyes on at the moment? Are you still eyeing off some good marathons?
We'll see. So currently nothing's on the schedule. I raced Boston this past spring. It went terribly.
I didn't see. You don't have to tell me, but what went wrong there?
Oh, who knows? It was one of those ones where you start and you get about a mile in, and right from there it's going to be a very long day. It almost felt like the only way I can describe it to myself is I went in with like the gas tank half full. I never felt like and it wasn't that I was like not eating well leading in. It was or tapered down. I did both of those, but it just didn't feel like I was fully energized right from the start. And it was a very long slog. I think I ran 216, 217. But it was quite brutal. And I was so burnt out that I'm just now getting back into like resemblance of training. I've been exercising. I've been running, 60 to 80 miles a week, but just now is when I'm starting to like feel life back in my body.
I know you mentioned the finish time, but even though you felt so average, did you still go out at a pace? Like, what did you go through half in?
Oh no, I was out by then. In Boston by what is it, 7 miles? I was like, I'm full on bonked. I'm not going to make it to the finish line.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was a rough race. Yeah.
What have you run for a marathon?
That was my second marathon. I raced New York City as my debut. And would we run there? I don't know, 2:12, I think, or something like that.
Oh, wow. Because not renowned to be a super quick race either. It's quite twist and turny, isn't it? Yeah. I remember whenever an Aussie goes over there to run, I'm like, they're obviously there they've been paid to be there, or they're there for prize money, because no one's gone there to break PBs, are they?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Man, so if you, assuming, that I know you said you're taking it easy and exercising at 90 miles a week or whatever it was, but if you were to start targeting another marathon, what do you like? Have you got your eyes on next year at all in Paris? Like, are you looking to qualify?
To be honest, the idea of racing the Olympics is not something that sparks anything in me.
Wow.
So I think a major marathon would be more interesting to me than say the Olympic marathon. So yeah, maybe redemption at Boston.
It's funny you say that though, because I often look at the world of tennis, and you look at the four majors that they have in the tennis world. Like, a Wimbledon means so much more to a tennis player than an Olympic title. And I don't know that you can make that comparison directly with distance running, but I think, like, if it's a Berlin marathon or a London marathon, it'd be interesting to speak to a number of athletes about. I mean, you can't really get past the childhood dream of the Olympics for a lot of people.
No, but financially, a world marathon major victory is a whole lot more lucrative than an Olympic medal for the marathon. Yeah,
probably true in tennis as well. I mean, you're not taking too much from an Olympic victory comparison to sort of a Wimbledon.
Exactly.
No, awesome, man. And in terms of your coaching now, like, I've been enjoying the last couple of days having a good look at your website and seeing what you've created over there in the coaching front. Man, do you want to speak to that a little bit? I'll make sure at the start of this people will hear about it, and I'll have the show notes and everything linked to it for people interested. But I mean, it'd be interesting to hear it from you, what you've sort of launched out to create with that.
Yeah, no. So we launched out this. It's a Club Northwoods Athletics, and we're just trying to showcase the Upper Valley, is what we call it, the area that we live in. And we think it has some of the best training in all of the United States. And so in an ideal world, we're going to try to get kind of like an elite training center group here, but also want to really emphasize just running in general. And so a lot of community outreach. We do a weekly group run in the area. We just launched a race series through Strava in the area. So it's a lot exciting, and doing some coaching as well, which has been a lot of fun. We're trying to grow it out.
Who put your website together? It looks awesome. I'm such a fan for a nice website, and I looked at yours, and it looks as though it's been done professionally. And I looked at yours and thought, okay, mine needs to be touched up a little.
No, you're being too kind. No, that was just us, the three of us on the team, just chipping away at it.
You've nailed it. Was it Squarespace?
Yeah, it's just Squarespace. Yeah.
Wow. Good job. I'm going to have to go and do some research on the template, and you might see some.
Exactly.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, I won't hold you up, but mate, thanks so much for coming on. So good to be able to pick your brain and hear a little bit more about the story behind the results. It's. I mean, I've admired your runs from a distance for quite a while, since back in the college days. So it's nice to actually get a chance to sit down and have a chat to you.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. Yeah,
Awesome,
a lot
man.
of fun.
Hey, we'll leave it there. I'll see you later, everybody.